Diana's dark fingers trembled as she slipped the napkin across Marvin's plate. 3 words scrawled in desperate ink. Don't drink anything. The billionaire's crystal wine glass paused halfway to his lips as their eyes met, her deep brown gaze cutting through the candlelit restaurant's pretense, and in that instant, he realized this beautiful black waitress wasn't just serving dinner, she was saving his life. Welcome, and prepare to be captivated. This is Powder Room Tales, where every story is crafted with one thing in mind, you. Our tales are addictive, emotional, and unforgettable. So if you're new, subscribe now and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss a single one. Tell me, from which city are you joining our community of story lovers? Your location in the comments below helps us connect with our family across the world. And don't forget to come back tomorrow. I have another tale prepared that will keep you on the edge of your seat. May God bless every one of you, my amazing Powder Room Tales family, with a long, joyful, and fulfilling life. Let's begin today's story. The 42nd floor of the Cortes Tower gleamed like a monument to corporate dominance, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a god's-eye view of the city sprawling below. Marvin Cortes stood with his back to the mahogany conference table, hands clasped behind him as he watched rush-hour traffic crawl like ants through the streets. At 38, he commanded an empire worth $12 billion, yet the reflection staring back at him from the glass looked hollow around the edges. "Sir?" His assistant's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Blackwood is here for your 6 o'clock." Marvin didn't turn around. Richard Blackwood, his business partner of 7 years, the man who'd helped him build half his fortune. Tonight's dinner was supposed to celebrate their latest acquisition, a tech startup that would revolutionize their portfolio. Yet something had felt off about Richard lately, the way he'd insisted on choosing the restaurant, an urgency in scheduling tonight's meeting.
"Send him in," Marvin said, finally turning from the window. Richard entered with his usual confident stride, silver hair perfectly styled, his smile not quite reaching his pale blue eyes. "Ready to toast our success?" "Always." Marvin straightened his Italian silk tie, the lie sliding out as smoothly as his practiced business smile. He'd learned long ago that showing doubt was showing weakness, and weakness was something Marvin Cortes could never afford. As they rode the elevator down to the waiting limousine, Marvin's phone buzzed incessantly. Stock reports, meeting requests, merger proposals. The endless demands of a man whose signature could move markets. He answered each with mechanical precision, his mind elsewhere. When had success become so isolating? When had trust become such a rare commodity in his world? The limousine pulled up to La Lumiere, the most exclusive restaurant in the financial district. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Marvin had eaten here 100 times, always surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Tonight felt no different, yet somehow everything felt different. 12 miles across the city, Diana Dyer stood before her bathroom mirror, pinning her natural hair into the sleek updo required by La Lumiere's dress code. Her reflection showed tired eyes. Beautiful, yes, but weary from another double shift that had started at 6 that morning. At 28, she possessed the kind of striking beauty that turned heads. High cheekbones that caught the light, skin like burnished copper, and an intelligence that sparkled in her dark eyes, even when exhaustion weighed on her shoulders. "You've got this, Dee," she whispered to herself, the same pep talk she gave every evening before walking into that world of privilege and pretense. Her studio apartment told the story she couldn't share at work. Medical textbooks stacked beside her bed, acceptance letters to nursing programs she couldn't afford, and a framed photo of her younger brother in his army uniform. The reason she worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. His medical bills from his injury overseas consumed everything she earned, but she'd never let him know the sacrifice. Diana grabbed her server's uniform from its careful hook by the door. The black dress and white apron transformed her from Diana the dreamer into Diana the invisible. Just another service worker in the background of other people's important lives. She'd perfected the art of blending in, of being helpful without being noticed, efficient without being memorable. The bus ride to La Lumière gave her time to study. Tonight, it was pharmacology notes crammed between her fingers, stolen moments of learning in a life that felt perpetually on pause. She knew the molecular structure of every painkiller in existence, could calculate drug interactions in her head, but to the wealthy patrons she'd served tonight, she'd be nothing more than a pair of hands refilling water glasses.
La Lumière's kitchen buzzed with pre-dinner energy when Diana arrived. Chef Laurent barked orders in rapid French while servers scurried between stations, polishing silver and arranging flowers. Diana tied her apron with practiced efficiency, her movements calm despite the chaos around her. "Diana, you're in the VIP section tonight," said Elena, the floor manager. "We've got the Cortes party coming in, table 12, billionaire CEO, so everything perfect, yes?" Diana nodded, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. She'd heard of Marvin Cortes, of course. His face graced business magazines, his name appeared in Forbes lists, his company's logo topped skyscrapers throughout the city. Another wealthy man in an expensive suit who'd look right through her. She began her pre-service routine, checking table settings, memorizing wine selections, and reviewing the evening specials. But as she polished the crystal at table 12, something made her pause. The arrangement felt different tonight. The wine glasses were positioned just so, and the flowers moved slightly to the left. Small changes that wouldn't matter to most people, but Diana had an eye for detail that came from years of studying everything from molecular biology to human behavior. A chill ran down her spine as she noticed the sommelier she'd never seen before, the one arranging bottles behind the bar with unusual care. The way he kept glancing toward table 12, the way his hands shook slightly as he handled the wine. Diana finished her setup, but the unease lingered. In her world, survival meant paying attention to things others missed. Tonight, every instinct she possessed was telling her that something was terribly wrong. She checked her watch, 7:45 p.m. The Cortes party would arrive any minute, and with them a feeling that this evening would change everything. As the restaurant's front door opened and two figures in tailored coats stepped inside, Diana smoothed her apron and prepared to become invisible once again. But tonight, being invisible might be exactly what would save a life. Have you ever found yourself judging someone before truly seeing who they are beneath the surface? Like and subscribe if you're ready to discover how two different worlds collide most suddenly. What do you think Diana noticed that has her so worried? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The moment Marvin Cortes stepped into La Lumière, Diana felt the shift in the restaurant's energy. Conversations quieted to respectful murmurs, servers straightened their postures, and even the ambient lighting seemed to spotlight his entrance. He moved with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding attention, his charcoal Armani suit fitting like it was sewn onto his tall, lean frame. His business partner, Richard Blackwood, walked beside him, older, with silver hair and calculating eyes that swept the room like a predator assessing territory. Diana approached their table with professional grace, water pitcher in hand, her trained smile masking the unease that had been building all evening. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to La Lumière." Marvin glanced up briefly, his steel-gray eyes meeting hers for just a moment before returning to his phone. She was invisible to him, as expected, just another service worker in his world of power and privilege. "We'll start with the Chateau Margaux 2010, Richard said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "The bottle you have chilling should be perfect." Diana's blood ran cold.
the bottle that the nervous sommelier had been handling with such strange care, the same sommelier she kept glancing toward their table with barely concealed anxiety, the same man she'd never seen before in her 2 years at La Lumiere. "Of course, sir. I'll have that brought right over." As she walked toward the bar, every instinct screamed danger. Diana had grown up in neighborhoods where survival meant reading situations correctly, where missing a signal could mean the difference between safety and harm. Her brother had taught her that, before the IED in Afghanistan had stolen his ability to protect anyone. She watched the sommelier's hands tremble as he poured the wine into the decanter, his movements too careful, too deliberate. When he thought no one was looking, he wiped sweat from his brow despite the restaurant's cool temperature. Diana's nursing studies had taught her to recognize the signs of extreme stress, and this man was drowning in it. Her mind raced through possibilities. Poison in the wine? It would be subtle, untraceable until too late. A billionaire's death could look like a heart attack, especially if the right substance was used. She thought of the molecular structures she'd memorized: digitalis, ricin, cyanide, any of which could be masked by the wine's complex bouquet. Diana moved closer, pretending to arrange glasses while watching the sommelier's technique. There, a tiny vial palmed in his left hand, its contents already emptied into the decanter. Her breath caught as she recognized the slight bitter almond scent that shouldn't have been there, barely detectable beneath the wine's rich aroma. Cyanide. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Someone was planning to murder Marvin Cortes tonight, and she was the only one who knew. Diana's hands shook as she approached table 12 with the poisoned wine, her mind calculating rapidly. She couldn't simply refuse to serve it. That would raise suspicions and potentially put her own life in danger. She couldn't call out a warning. Who would believe a waitress over a respected sommelier? But she couldn't let this man die, regardless of who he was or what he represented. As she reached their table, Marvin was deep in conversation with Richard about quarterly projections, completely unaware that death was being poured into crystal glasses just feet away. The irony wasn't lost on her. A man who could buy anything in the world was powerless against the most basic threat to his existence. "Your wine, gentlemen," Diana said, her voice remarkably calm as she set the decanter on the table. Richard smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Perfect timing. We have much to celebrate tonight." Diana began pouring the wine into Marvin's glass first, as protocol demanded for the senior guest. The deep red liquid caught the candlelight, beautiful and deadly. As she poured, her mind worked frantically. How could she warn him without alerting his would-be killer? The answer came as she reached for a clean napkin to wipe a water spot on the table. With movements honed by years of efficient service, Diana palmed a pen from her apron pocket. In the seconds it took to fold the napkin and place it beside Marvin's plate, she scrawled 3 desperate words in her careful handwriting: "Don't drink anything." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she completed the pour and stepped back, praying he would notice the napkin before lifting the glass to his lips. Marvin continued talking, his hand already reaching for the wine in an automatic gesture of social ritual. "The acquisition will triple our market share in the Southeast," he was saying to Richard, the crystal stem between his fingers. Diana watched in horror as he began to lift the glass, the poisoned wine catching the light like liquid rubies. Time seemed to slow as she realized her warning might go unnoticed, that she might watch a man die despite her efforts to save him. Then, as if divine intervention, Marvin's free hand brushed against the napkin she'd placed so carefully beside his plate. His fingers traced the folded edges absently as he spoke, and Diana saw the moment he felt the slight roughness of pen ink against the smooth fabric. Their eyes met across the candlelit table, her deep brown gaze filled with desperate urgency, his steel-gray eyes suddenly sharp with confusion and dawning awareness. The wineglass paused halfway to his lips as he unfolded the napkin with careful precision, shielding the movement from. Diana watched his face change as he read her warning, saw the exact moment when understanding crashed over him like a cold wave. His businessman's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing shock, fear, and something else: gratitude toward the beautiful black woman who had just saved his life. The glass remained suspended in his hand, the poisoned wine untouched, as Marvin Cortes realized that his trusted business partner had just tried to murder him, and his invisible waitress had become his guardian angel. When was the last time you trusted your instincts, even when others might have dismissed your concerns? Hit that like button if Diana's quick thinking just saved the day. But what happens next when Marvin realizes the danger he's in? Comment below with your predictions.
The wine glass slipped from Marvin's fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor as the poisoned Chateau Margaux spread like blood across the white tablecloth. The sound echoed through La Lumiere's dining room, drawing startled glances from nearby cables, but Marvin's eyes remained locked on Diana's face. "Clumsy of me," Marvin roared, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind, but his steel-gray eyes conveyed a different message to Diana. "I understand. What do we do now?" Richard's face had gone pale, his calculating gaze darting between the spilled wine and Diana's tense posture. "How unfortunate," he said, but Diana caught the flash of rage behind his practiced smile. "Perhaps we should order another bottle?" "No need," Marvin replied, standing slowly. "I think I've lost my appetite." Diana moved quickly, kneeling to collect the crystal shards with professional efficiency, but her hands trembled as she worked. Over the bustle of cleanup, she whispered urgently, "They're watching the exits. Kitchen staff bathroom, 2 minutes." Marvin nodded almost imperceptibly, his businessman's training allowing him to mask his fear behind a veneer of casual disappointment. "Richard, I need to make a quick call to Hong Kong. The time difference, you understand." "Of course," Richard said, but his eyes had grown cold. "I'll wait here." As Marvin headed toward the restaurant's back corridor, Diana's heart raced with the terrifying certainty that they were running out of time. She'd seen the way the sommelier had tensed when the wine spilled, noticed how he'd immediately stepped toward the phone behind the bar. They knew their plan had failed, and desperate people did desperate things. Diana finished cleaning the glass and hurried toward the kitchen, her mind calculating escape routes with the same precision she used to memorize medical procedures. La Lumiere's layout was etched in her memory: service corridors, emergency exits, blind spots where security cameras couldn't reach. She found Marvin in the narrow hallway between the kitchen and staff facilities, his expensive suit looking out of place among industrial steel and fluorescent lighting. Up close, she could see the fear he was trying so hard to hide, the way his jaw clenched as reality crashed down around his ordered world. "How did you know?" he asked, without preamble. "Cyanide has a bitter almond smell. Your sommelier was sweating, nervous, and I'd never seen him before. Plus, he was handling that wine like it was nuclear waste." Marvin stared at him with new understanding. This wasn't just any waitress. This was someone with training, intelligence, and observational skills that had literally saved his life. "You're not just a server, are you?" "Nursing student," Diana said curtly, peering around the corner toward the dining room. "But we can exchange resumes later. Right now, we need to get you out of here alive." "I can call my security team." "No phones," Diana interrupted. "If they're professional enough to infiltrate La Lumiere's wine service, they're monitoring communications. We go now, or we don't go at all." The urgency in her voice cut through Marvin's natural inclination to take control. For the first time in decades, he found himself following instead of leading, trusting his life to someone he'd met an hour ago. Diana led him through the kitchen's organized chaos, weaving between line cooks and dishwashers who barely glanced up from their work.
The staff exit opened onto a narrow alley that reeked of garbage and old cooking oil, a far cry from Marvin's usual world of marble lobbies and crystal chandeliers.
"My driver," Marvin started. "It's probably already compromised," Diana finished. "If they've been planning this, they've thought of everything." As if summoned by our words, the alley suddenly erupted with movement. Two men in dark suits emerged from behind a dumpster, their faces cold and professional. Diana's blood turned to ice as she recognized the type. Not street thugs, but corporate assassins, the kind who made problems disappear without a trace. "Mr. Cortes," the taller one called out, his voice carrying the flat accent of someone who'd learned English as a tool rather than a language. "Mr. Blackwood is concerned." Marvin stepped instinctively in front of Diana, a gesture that surprised them both. "I'm fine, thank you. Just needed some air." "I think you need to come with us," the shorter assassin said, his hand moving toward his jacket in a motion that needed no explanation. Diana's mind raced through options, none of them good. They were trapped in an alley, outnumbered, with nowhere to run. But growing up in rough neighborhoods had taught her that sometimes the only way out was through. "Fire in the kitchen!" she screamed suddenly, her voice carrying the panic of someone who'd discovered mortal danger. "Fire in the kitchen! Everyone out!" The alley filled with chaos as kitchen staff poured through the exit, creating a human wall between the assassins and their targets. Diana grabbed Marvin's hand, soft from a life of luxury, but strong from whatever physical training billionaires did to stay sharp, and pulled him into the crowd. "This way," she hissed, leading him through the maze of panicking restaurant workers toward the street. They burst onto the sidewalk as sirens began wailing in the distance. Diana's fire alarm had triggered an automatic response. The evening rush hour crowd provided perfect camouflage as they blended into the river of commuters and tourists. "My apartment's 6 blocks north," Diana said, checking behind them for pursuit. "It's not safe, but it's somewhere to think." "The bus," Diana added, spotting the approaching city transit. "They won't expect us to use public transportation." As they climbed aboard, Marvin fumbled for his wallet, but Diana had already dropped exact change into the fare box. "Sit in the back," she whispered, "and try to look like you ride the bus every day." The 25-minute journey through the city's less affluent districts felt like hours. Diana kept watch through the grimy windows, while Marvin tried to process how his perfectly ordered world had collapsed in the span of an hour. Every stop brought new passengers, night shift workers heading home, hospital staff beginning late shifts, people whose lives couldn't be more different from his boardroom existence. "This is us," Diana said quietly, as the bus wheezed to a stop beside a converted warehouse building. The narrow stairwell seemed to climb forever. By the 10th floor, Marvin was breathing hard, his business lunch lifestyle no match for Diana's daily routine. Diana barely seemed winded, taking the steps 2 at a time with the efficiency of someone who'd climbed them countless times. 24th floor, she said, glancing back at him. "The elevator's been broken for 3 weeks, but the good news is anyone following us will be just as tired." When they finally reached her door, both of them were catching their breath from more than just the climb. The adrenaline of their escape was wearing off, leaving them to confront the reality of what had just happened and what it meant. Diana unlocked 3 separate deadbolts before pushing open her door. She moved through the small space with efficient grace, checking the window locks, adjusting the curtains to eliminate any gaps, and turning off lights that might cast shadows visible from outside. Marvin watched her work, struck by how naturally she'd taken charge of their safety. In his world, he was the one who made the decisions, who commanded rooms and controlled outcomes. Here, he was completely dependent on this woman he'd known for less than 3 hours. "Sit," Diana said, gesturing to the small couch that doubled as her study area. Medical textbooks slid aside to make room for him. "We need to figure out what's going on." Marvin settled onto the worn fabric, his expensive suit looking absurdly out of place against the second-hand furniture. "Richard's been my business partner for 7 years, he said, his voice hollow with betrayal. "We built the Southeastern Division together. I trusted him with everything." Diana pulled a chair from her tiny dining table, positioning it directly across from him.
In the apartment's close quarters, they were forced into an intimacy that neither had expected, knees almost touching, able to see every flicker of emotion in each other's eyes. "Trust is a luxury you can't afford right now," Diana said, gently but firmly. "Who else knew about tonight's dinner? Who chose the restaurant? Who had access to your schedule?" Marvin ran his hands through his hair, disturbing the perfect styling for the first time in years. "Richards chose La Lumière, said he knew the sommelier personally, could get us the best table." The words tasted bitter as he spoke them. God, I was so blind. "You weren't blind," Diana corrected. "You were human. You trusted someone you cared about. That's not a weakness." Their eyes met across the small space, and Marvin saw something in Diana's expression that he rarely encountered in his world. Genuine compassion without agenda. She wasn't trying to gain something from his vulnerability. She was simply offering comfort to another human being in pain. "Why did you save me?" he asked suddenly. "You don't know me. For all you knew, I deserved whatever was coming." Diana was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Because nobody deserves to die from poison in their wine. And because I've seen what violence does to families. My brother—" She trailed off, glancing at the photograph on her desk. "Tell me," Marvin said softly, and realized he genuinely wanted to know. Not because the information might be useful, but because he wanted to understand this remarkable woman who'd risked everything to save a stranger. "Army medic," Diana said, her voice thick with emotion. "IED in Afghanistan took his legs and gave him a brain injury. He's in a care facility now, and I work 3 jobs to cover what the VA won't pay for." She looked directly at Marvin. "I know what it's like to lose someone you love to senseless violence. I couldn't just stand there and watch it happen again." The silence that followed was filled with unspoken understanding. Here, in this tiny apartment, with its thin walls and second-hand furniture, Marvin felt more connected to another human being than he had in his penthouse office or marble boardrooms. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it more deeply than any apology he'd ever offered in a business meeting. "About your brother? About everything you've had to sacrifice." Diana nodded, accepting his words without the dismissive politeness he usually encountered. "He was trying to save his unit when it happened. That's who he is. Someone who puts others first. I guess it runs in the family." "Is that why you're studying nursing? To help him?" "To help everyone," Diana replied. "But yes, he's part of it. I want to understand trauma, brain injuries, how to help people rebuild their lives after everything falls apart." Marvin looked around the apartment with new eyes, seeing not poverty, but purpose. Every sacrifice Diana had made, every extra shift she'd worked, every textbook she'd studied by lamplight, it all served a mission larger than herself. "You could have been a nurse already, if you'd had the money for school." "Could-haves don't pay rent," Diana said with a slight smile that didn't quite hide her pain. "But I'll get there. Just takes longer when you're working your way through." The space between them seemed to shrink as they talked. The physical proximity of the small apartment created an emotional intimacy that surprised them both. Marvin found himself leaning forward, drawn to Diana's strength and compassion. She represented everything his world lacked: genuine purpose, selfless love, the courage to sacrifice for others. "Diana," he said, her name feeling different on his tongue than it had in the restaurant. Not the name of a server, but the name of the woman who'd saved his life and was now sharing her deepest truths with him. A sound in the hallway made them both freeze, footsteps, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside Diana's door. They looked at each other in alarm, the moment of connection shattered by the return of immediate danger. Diana moved silently to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. The footsteps resumed, fading down the hallway, but the damage was done. Their sanctuary had been compromised, at least in their minds, and the fragile intimacy they had begun to build was overshadowed by the reality that people wanted Marvin dead.
"We can't stay here long," Diana whispered, returning to her chair. "But we need a plan before we move again." Marvin nodded, but part of him didn't want. For the first time in years, he'd found somewhere that felt real, someone who saw him as more than just his net worth. The outside world could wait a little longer. Have you ever found yourself opening up to someone in circumstances you never expected? What made that connection feel safe? Hit subscribe if you're feeling the connection between Diana and Marvin. But are they really safe, or is danger closing in? Let us know what you think happens next. The photograph on Diana's desk seemed to watch them as they sat in the apartment's dim light, planning their next move. Marvin found his gaze drawn to it repeatedly. Diana, in hospital scrubs, beaming with pride next to a young man whose smile matched hers perfectly. The family resemblance was unmistakable, but it was the uniform that told the real story. Army medic patches, the confident posture of someone who'd trained to save lives in the world's most dangerous places. "That's Darren," Diana said, noticing his attention. Taken the day before his deployment, he was so excited to serve, to make a difference. Her voice carried the weight of everything that had changed since that photograph was taken. "How old was he?" Marvin asked gently. 22, same age I am now." Diana picked up the frame, tracing her brother's face with one finger. "He always said he wanted to be like me, said I was the brave one for studying medicine, for wanting to heal people. But he was wrong. He was the brave one." In the intimate space of the apartment, with danger lurking somewhere beyond the locked door, the barriers between them continued to crumble. Marvin had built his fortune by reading people, by understanding their motivations and weaknesses. But Diana's story wasn't about weakness. It was about a strength he'd rarely encountered in his world of corporate maneuvering. "Tell me about the day it happened," then immediately second-guessed himself. "I'm sorry, you don't have to." "I want to," Diana interrupted. "I never get to talk about it. Most people hear war injury and change the subject." She set the photograph back on the desk and settled deeper into her chair, their knees almost touching in the small space. It was supposed to be a routine medical evacuation. Darren's unit was called to help wounded Afghan soldiers. Not Americans, not allies, just people who needed help. That's the kind of person he is. Marvin listened, struck by how Diana spoke about her brother in the present tense, as if his essential self remained unchanged despite his injuries. "The IED was buried under what looked like medical supplies," Diana continued, her voice steady but distant. "Someone had booby-trapped aid packages, knowing that medics would come running. Darren threw himself on top of 2 wounded civilians when the blast went off. He saved their lives, but the shrapnel—" She paused, composing herself. "The doctor said his brain injuries were so severe he'd never be the same person again." "But he survived," Marvin said quietly. "He survived, but the brother I knew, the one who used to call me every Sunday to make sure I was eating enough vegetables, who sent me care packages during finals week, that Darren lives somewhere I can't reach anymore. The VA facility where he lives now, they're good to him, but it costs everything I make and more." Marvin felt something crack inside his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced since he'd learned to armor his heart against the world's pain. "That's why you work 3 jobs. That's why I do everything," Diana confirmed. "Why I study by lamplight after double shifts, why I live in this shoebox, why I notice things other people miss. When someone you love is trapped in a broken body with a damaged mind, you learn to fight for every advantage, every opportunity, every chance to make things better. The silence that followed felt heavy with understanding. Marvin looked around the apartment with completely different eyes, seeing not poverty but devotion, not limitation but love in action. "I need to tell you something," he said suddenly, "about Richard, about why he might want me dead." Diana nodded, sensing the shift in him, the way he decided to match her vulnerability with his own truth. 5 years ago, I discovered that Richard had been embezzling from our charitable foundation. Not much at first, just enough to fund a gambling habit. But it escalated. By the time I found out, he'd stolen nearly $2 million meant for veteran support programs. Diana's eyes widened. "You could have had him arrested." "I should have," Marvin said, his voice thick with regret. "Instead, I made him pay it back quietly. I thought I was being merciful, giving him a second chance. I told myself it was about protecting the company's reputation, but really, I didn't want to admit I'd been fooled by someone I considered a friend."
"So he's been planning revenge ever since," Diana concluded. "Worse than that. Last week I discovered he'd been stealing again, bigger amounts this time, more sophisticated methods. I was going to fire him tomorrow and turned everything over to the FBI. Marvin ran his hands through his hair. Tonight's dinner was supposed to be his last meal as my partner. Instead, it was supposed to be mine." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Richard had stolen money meant to help wounded veterans like Darren, and now Diana, who was sacrificing everything for her veteran brother, had saved the life of the man who could have stopped it years ago. "You're blaming yourself," Diana observed, reading the guilt written across his features. "If I'd acted 5 years ago, if I'd been strong enough to do the right thing instead of the easy thing, Richard never would have had the chance to steal more money, money that could have helped people like your brother." Diana was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation and what it meant for both of them. When she spoke, her voice was firm but kind. "You made a mistake, but you're not responsible for Richard's choices, and you're not responsible for what happened to Darren. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and there's no one to blame except the people who choose to do evil." Marvin looked at her in amazement. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter, who'd lost so much to pay for someone else's sacrifice, and she was offering him forgiveness he didn't deserve. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you keep going, keep hoping when everything seems stacked against you?" Diana smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all evening. "Because giving up doesn't help anyone. Darren didn't give up when that bomb went off. He kept moving, kept protecting people even when he was dying. The least I can do is keep moving too." In that moment, surrounded by medical textbooks and the photograph of a hero, Marvin understood what real strength looked like. Not the power to control markets or command boardrooms, but the courage to love deeply despite loss, to sacrifice daily without complaint, to find hope in the darkest circumstances. He reached across the small space between them, taking Diana's hand in his. Her skin was warm, marked with the calluses of hard work, and he felt more connected to another human being than he had in years.
"Diana," he said, her name carrying new weight, new meaning. "When this is over, I want to help. Your brother's medical bills, your nursing school, everything." "No," Diana said firmly, but without pulling her hand away. "I don't need rescuing, Marvin. I need a partnership. I need someone who sees me as an equal, not a charity case." And in that declaration, Marvin realized he was falling in love. When have you had to choose between the easy path and doing what's right? How did that choice shape who you became? Double tap if you were feeling the emotional depth between these two. Their past wounds are bringing them closer, but will their newfound connection survive what's coming next? Comment your thoughts. The hours that followed felt suspended in time. as if the tiny apartment existed in its own universe, separate from the dangers lurking outside. Diana had made coffee, real coffee, not the instant kind Marvin had expected, and they sat together on her small couch, sharing the warmth of the ceramic mugs and something deeper that neither wanted to name yet. "Tell me about before," Diana said softly, tucking her legs beneath her. In the lamplight, with her hair freed from its professional updo, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Before the billions, before the empire, who was Marvin Cortes when he was just Marvin? Marvin smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "Hungry," he said simply. "Always hungry. My mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat after my dad left. I used to do homework in the back of the laundromat while she folded other people's clothes for 75 cents a load." Diana's eyes widened with surprise. She'd assumed, like most people, that his wealth was inherited, that he'd been born into privilege. "You built everything from nothing." "Not nothing," Marvin corrected. "I had her, Maria Cortes, 4 feet 11 inches of pure determination. She used to say that being poor meant that you had to be twice as smart and work 3 times as hard, but it didn't mean you had to stay poor forever." "What happened to her?" Diana asked gently, sensing the past tense in his voice. "Cancer, 10 years ago. She got to see me make my first million, but—" His voice trailed off, and Diana saw the grief he still carried, the success that had come too late to share with the person who'd sacrificed everything for it. Without thinking, Diana reached over and took his hand. The gesture was simple, natural, but it sent electricity through both of them. In her small apartment surrounded by the evidence of her own struggles and dreams, they weren't a billionaire and a waitress. They were just 2 people who understood loss, who knew what it meant to fight for something bigger than themselves. "She sounds amazing," Diana said. "I wish I could have met her." "She would have loved you," Marvin replied, and the certainty in his voice surprised him. She had this way of seeing people's hearts, cutting through all the surface stuff to what really mattered. "You remind me of her in that way."
They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands intertwined, coffee cooling forgotten on the small table. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy, but inside Diana's apartment, peace had settled between them like a warm blanket. "Can I ask you something?" Marvin said eventually. "Why medicine? I mean, I understand wanting to help your brother, but you could have chosen anything." Diana considered the question, grateful that he cared enough to ask. "When I was 8, there was a shooting in our neighborhood. Not gang-related, just someone with too much pain and the gun. 3 people were hit, including Mrs. Washington from downstairs. She was like a grandmother to me and Darren." She paused, remembering. "The ambulance took forever to come. Mrs. Washington was bleeding, scared, and I didn't know how to help her. I just held her hand and told her stories about her cats while we waited. She died before the paramedics arrived." Marvin squeezed her hand gently, understanding the weight of that memory. "That night, I promised myself I'd never feel that helpless again. I started reading medical books from the library, learning everything I could about how the body works, how to help when help isn't coming fast enough." Diana met his eyes. "I became a waitress to pay the bills, but I've always been studying to be a healer." "And tonight, you saved my life with that knowledge," Marvin said. "Recognizing the cyanide, knowing how the poison would work, you turned years of study into action when it mattered most." "We saved each other," Diana corrected. "You trusted me when you had every reason not to. That took courage." The space between them seemed to shrink further. In the soft lamplight, Marvin could see flecks of gold in Diana's dark eyes,
could smell the faint scent of vanilla from her shampoo. She was beautiful. He'd noticed that from the first moment in the restaurant. But now he saw the intelligence behind her beauty, the strength and compassion that made her truly extraordinary. "Diana," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need you to know, what I said earlier about helping with your bills, your school, I didn't mean it as charity. I meant it as an investment."
"In what?" "In us," he said simply. "In whatever this is becoming between us. I know we've only known each other for a few hours, and I know the circumstances are insane, but I've never felt this connected to another person. You see me. Not my money, not my reputation, just me. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Diana's heart raced. She'd felt it too, this impossible connection growing between them with every shared story, every moment of vulnerability. But the rational part of her mind, the part that had learned to be cautious, to protect herself from disappointment, whispered warnings. "Marvin," she said carefully, "we're running on adrenaline and fear. When this is over, when you're back in your penthouse and I'm back to serving tables, then I'll come find you. Not at the restaurant where you have to pretend to be invisible, but here, in your world. I'll knock on this door and ask Diana Dyer if she wants to have coffee with Marvin Cortes, not because he's rich or powerful, but because he can't stop thinking about the woman who saved his life and stole his heart in the same evening." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw and terrifying in their sincerity. Diana searched his face for signs of the practiced charm she'd learned to recognize in wealthy customers, but found only genuine emotion. "You really mean that?" she said, wonder in her voice. "I really mean it," Marvin confirmed. "Diana, I've spent years building walls around my heart because I learned that everyone wanted something from me. You're the first person who's made me want to tear those walls down." She leaned closer, and he could feel her breath warm against his cheek. "I'm scared, not of the people trying to kill you, but of this, of feeling this much for someone I just met." "So am I. But maybe that's what makes it real." When Diana kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as he responded, it felt like coming home. In her tiny apartment with its second-hand furniture and stacks of medical books, surrounded by the evidence of her struggles and dreams, Marvin Cortes fell completely and irrevocably in love. They broke apart slowly, foreheads touching, breathing the same air in the intimate space. "Whatever happens next," Diana said softly, "I want you to know that tonight, meeting you, saving you, falling for you, it's the best thing that's happened to me in years." "Even with the assassination attempts?" Marvin asked, managing a smile. "Even with the assassination attempts," Diana replied, laughing despite everything. "They brought you into my life." For a perfect moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no Richard, no danger, no differences in their backgrounds or bank accounts. There was only this: two hearts recognizing their match across every barrier that should have kept them apart. But perfect moments, they both knew, never lasted long. Have you ever felt an instant, deep connection with someone that defied logic and circumstances? What made you trust that feeling? Heartbiss if you're rooting for Diana and Marvin. Their love is blooming, but danger is still lurking. Will their newfound happiness survive what's coming? Tell us in the comments. The pounding on Diana's door shattered their perfect moment like glass hitting concrete. 3 sharp knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Deliberate, authoritative, terrifying in their precision. "NYPD, open up!" Diana and Marvin froze, still inches apart from their kiss, their hearts hammering for entirely different reasons now. The warmth that had enveloped them seconds before evaporated, replaced by the cold reality that their sanctuary had been discovered. "How did they find us?" Diana whispered. But even as she asked, her mind was racing through possibilities. The fire alarm at the restaurant, security cameras on the street, and her own name in the employee records that Richard could have accessed. "Diana Dyer, we need to speak with you about the incident at La Lumiere tonight. We have a warrant." Marvin started to stand, his protective instincts kicking in, but Diana grabbed his arm. Something was wrong. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where police visits were common, and this felt different. Too clean, too convenient. "Show me the warrant," Diana called back, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Slide it under the door." "Ma'am, please open the door. We just need to ask you a few questions about what you witnessed tonight." Diana's blood ran cold. She hadn't witnessed anything. She'd participated, saved a life, fled a crime scene. The real police would know that from the restaurant security footage. These weren't officers. They were Richard's people, using the one authority most people wouldn't question.
She caught Marvin's eye and shook her head slightly, then pressed her finger to her lips. Moving silently, she grabbed a small mirror from her vanity and angled it to peer under the door. Instead of the polished shoes she'd expect from real detectives, she saw expensive Italian leather, the same type Richard had been wearing at dinner. The knocking came again, more insistent now. "Miss Dyer, we know you're in there. Mr. Cortes is wanted for questioning in connection with a terrorist plot. You're harboring a fugitive." "Terrorist plot?" Marvin whispered, his face going pale with rage and disbelief. "They're painting me as the criminal?" Diana's mind worked frantically. Richard had resources, connections, and the ability to spin any story he needed. By morning, the news would probably report that billionaire CEO Marvin Cortes had been involved in some fabricated scandal, and the waitress who'd tried to help him had been found dead. Collateral damage in a dangerous game. "There's a fire escape," Diana whispered, pointing toward her single window. "But it's a 24-story drop if we make a mistake." "Better than what's waiting behind that door," Marvin replied grimly. As Diana moved toward the window, her foot caught the corner of her coffee table, sending her medical textbooks crashing to the floor. The sound echoed through the thin walls like gunshots. The voices outside went quiet for a moment, then exploded into action. "Breach the door!" The first slam against Diana's reinforced locks sent vibrations through the entire apartment. Her landlord hadn't skimped on security. The door was steel-reinforced, designed to withstand exactly this kind of assault. But it wouldn't hold forever. Diana threw open the window and looked down at the fire escape's narrow metal platform. The city lights below seemed impossibly far away, the iron railings corroded with age and weather. But as another thunderous slam shook the door, she realized they had no choice. "Ladies first," Marvin said, but Diana was already climbing through the window with the practiced grace of someone who'd grown up in tenements where fire escapes were playgrounds. Marvin followed, his expensive suit catching on the window frame as he squeezed through. The night air hit them like a slap, cold and unforgiving. 24 stories up, the wind whipped around the building with a fury that made the narrow platform feel even more precarious. "Down 2 flights, then across to the next building. There's a gap, but it's jumpable." Behind them, the assault on the door intensified. They could hear splintering wood now, the groan of metal under extreme pressure. They started down the fire escape, each step a careful negotiation with rust and gravity. Marvin's dress shoes, perfect for marble boardrooms, slipped dangerously on the metal grating. Diana moved ahead of him, her server's shoes providing better grip, testing each step before trusting it with their combined weight. On the 22nd floor, disaster struck. As Marvin put his weight on what looked like a solid step, the corroded metal gave way with a shriek that echoed off the surrounding buildings. His left leg plunged through the gap, metal edges tearing through his expensive trousers and into his skin. For a terrifying moment, he dangled by his arms, his body weight threatening to pull him through the hole entirely. "Marvin!" Diana lunged forward, grabbing his jacket with both hands, her nursing training taking over as she assessed the situation. Blood was already seeping through his torn pants, and his face had gone white with pain and shock. Leave me, he gasped through gritted teeth. They want me, not you. Get away while you can. Like hell, Diana replied, adjusting her grip to better support his weight. We're getting out of this together. But even as she spoke, they could hear the apartment door finally giving way, followed by heavy footsteps and shouted commands. Their pursuers would be at the window within minutes. Diana looked up at the gap they still needed to jump to reach the next building, a span that had seemed manageable moments before but now looked impossible with Marvin injured. Below them, the street seemed to spin in the wind, a kaleidoscope of lights and certain death. I can't make that jump, Marvin said, reading her thoughts. Not like this. Then we go down, Diana decided, all the way down to street level. There's an alley behind this building. If we can reach it, we can disappear into the subway system. 22 floors on a damaged fire escape with professional killers behind us. Marvin's laugh held no humor. That's not a plan, it's suicide. It's what we've got, Diana replied, helping him work his leg free from the twisted metal. The wound was deep but not life-threatening. She could treat it if they survived long enough. As they resumed their descent, moving more carefully now, the reality of their situation settled over them like a shroud. The perfect moment in her apartment, the confessions, the kiss, the promise of something beautiful growing between them, felt like a dream from another lifetime. Marvin, Diana said as they reached the 20th floor, his voice heavy with something that might have been goodbye. If we don't make it out of this, we will, she interrupted fiercely. We have to. But if we don't, I need you to know that tonight, meeting you, falling for you, it was worth everything. Even this. Tears that Diana hadn't realized she was crying froze on her cheeks in the cold wind. Above them, flashlight beams began probing out the window they'd escaped through, searching the darkness for signs of their prey. Save the speeches for when we're safe, she said, but her voice broke on the words. Because, despite her fierce determination, her medical knowledge, and street-smart survival instincts, Diana couldn't see how this story ended with anything but tragedy. They were 20 floors up on a crumbling fire escape, pursued by professional killers with nowhere left to run. The love that had bloomed between them in the space of a single evening now felt like a cruel joke, a glimpse of happiness offered just before everything fell apart. As sirens began to wail in the distance, whether real police or more of Richard's people, they couldn't tell, Diana realized that saving Marvin's life in the restaurant might have only delayed the inevitable. Sometimes, she thought, as they continued their desperate descent, love wasn't enough. Have you ever had to choose between your own safety and protecting someone you love? What gave you the strength to make that choice? If your heart is breaking for Diana and Marvin right now, hit that like button. Will their love survive this deadly game, or is this where their story ends? Share your hopes in the comments. 18 floors down, with 6 more to go, Marvin's strength finally gave out. His injured leg buckled as they reached another landing, and he collapsed against the brick wall, his face gray with pain and blood loss. The wound from the jagged metal had torn deeper than Diana had initially thought, and his expensive shirt was now soaked crimson beneath his jacket. I can't, he gasped, sliding down the wall to sit on the narrow platform. Diana, I can't make it any further. Above them, the flashlight beams were getting closer, accompanied by the sound of boots on metal as their pursuers began their own descent. Below, the street still seemed impossibly far away, 6 floors that might as well have been 60 given Marvin's condition. Diana knelt beside him, her hands automatically finding his pulse, checking his pupils, falling into the clinical assessment mode that her years of medical training had drilled into her. He was going into shock, pale, clammy, breathing shallow. Without proper medical attention soon, he wouldn't need assassins to finish him off. Listen to me, she said, gripping his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. We're going to get through this, but I need you to fight. Fight for what? Marvin's voice was barely above a whisper. Even if we make it down, Even if we somehow escape tonight, Richard has unlimited resources. He can pay people to hunt us forever. What kind of life is that for you?" "A life with you," Diana replied without hesitation. "That's what I'm fighting for."
The simplicity of her answer cut through Marvin's despair like a blade. Here was this extraordinary woman, brilliant, brave, beautiful, willing to risk everything for a love that had bloomed in the span of a single evening. She deserved better than a life on the run, better than the danger that would follow him wherever he went. "You don't understand," he said, trying to make her see reason. "Richard won't just come after me. He'll destroy anyone who helps me, anyone I care about. If you stay with me, you'll never be safe. Your brother will never be safe." Diana's hand stilled on his face. The mention of Darren hit her like a physical blow, because she knew Marvin was right. Richard had the resources to hurt anyone, anywhere. Her brother, helpless in his care facility, would be an easy target for someone determined to cause her pain. For a moment, doubt crept in. She could disappear tonight, slip away while Marvin was injured and unable to follow. Change her name, move to another city, protect Darren by cutting all ties to this impossible situation. It would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But as she looked into Marvin's gray eyes, eyes that held pain and love and the terrible certainty that he was about to lose her, Diana made her choice. "Then we don't run," she said firmly. "We fight." "Diana, no, listen to me." Her voice carried the steel she had inherited from growing up in tough neighborhoods, to determination that had carried her through years of sacrifice and study. "Richard has money and connections, but we have something he doesn't. We have the truth, and we have each other." She pulled out her phone, the device she had kept silent throughout their escape. "You said Richard was embezzling from veteran charities. You have evidence?" "Files on my secure server, transaction records, emails." "But Diana, even with proof." "Then we don't hide," she interrupted. "We go public. Every news station, every social media platform, every journalist who listen. We make Richard's crimes so public, so undeniable, that he can't make us disappear without everyone knowing exactly who's responsible." Marvin stared at her in amazement. Even injured, even terrified, she was thinking strategically, turning their greatest weakness, exposure, into their strongest weapon. "The media will tear us apart," he warned. "They'll dig into every part of our lives, question our story, make us out to be criminals or conspirators or—" "Let them," Diana said fiercely. "I'd rather face judgment from strangers than bullets from Richard's assassins. At least in the public eye, we have a chance to tell our side." Above them, the footsteps were getting closer. They had maybe 5 minutes before their pursuers reached this level. "My phone has a secure connection to my publicist," Marvin said, his business instincts kicking in despite his injuries. "If we can get the story out before Richard spins his version." "Do it," Diana urged, helping him to his feet. "But we need to keep moving while you make the calls. 6 more floors, and then we find the nearest 24-hour news station." As they resumed their careful descent, Marvin dialing with shaking fingers, Diana felt something she hadn't experienced since the night Darren was injured. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone praying for a miracle, but the determined hope of someone who'd chosen to fight for what mattered most. "Sarah, it's Marvin Cortes," he said into the phone as they reached the 15th floor. "I need you to call every media contact we have. In the next hour, I'm going to send you the story of the decade." Diana listened as he gave his publicist a rapid overview: the assassination attempt, Richard's embezzlement, the evidence that would expose everything. With each word, she could hear his strength returning, the natural leadership that had built his empire asserting itself, even in their desperate circumstances. "And Sarah, I want you to make sure everyone knows about Diana Dyer. She's not just the woman who saved my life. She's the woman I'm going to marry, if she'll have me." Diana stumbled on the next step, not from the treacherous metal grating, but from the shock of his words. They'd known each other for less than 6 hours, had shared a single kiss, and he was talking about marriage? "Marvin," she started, but he held up his hand. "I know it's crazy," he said, continuing their descent while juggling the phone. "I know we just met. I know the circumstances are insane. But Diana, I've spent my whole life making calculated decisions, measured risks, careful choices, and none of them ever made me feel the way you do." They reached the 10th floor as sirens wailed louder in the distance. Real police this time, Diana hoped, responding to reports of gunfire or break-ins in the building. "So yes," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Yes, I'll marry you, Marvin Cortes, if we survive the next hour." "When we survive," he corrected. And for the first time since the restaurant, his smile held genuine hope.
As they continued down the fire escape, no longer running in desperation but moving with purpose toward their public reckoning with Richard and his crimes, Diana realized that love wasn't about the perfect moment or the ideal circumstances. It was about choosing to fight for each other when everything else fell apart. Above them, the flashlight beams had stopped moving. Their pursuers had apparently decided that chasing two people down a fire escape in full view of the arriving police wasn't worth the risk. 5 more floors to go, and then they would face the world together. Diana Dyer and Marvin Cortes were going to war against a corrupt billionaire, and they were going to win. When faced with an impossible choice, have you ever discovered that the answer was to stop running and start fighting? What gave you that courage? Yes! Hit that subscribe button if you're cheering for Diana and Marvin's decision to fight back. But can love and truth really defeat money and power? The final act awaits. Drop your predictions below. 6 months later, Diana Dyer Cortes stood at the podium of the newly opened Darren Dyer Veterans Medical Center, her engagement ring catching the morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The state-of-the-art facility sprawled across 5 acres in downtown, its gardens and rehabilitation centers funded by the $27 million recovered from Richard Blackwood's theft, money that had finally found its way to the heroes who needed it most. "When my brother Darren was injured serving our country," Diana said to the gathered crowd of reporters, veterans, and dignitaries, "I thought I understood what sacrifice meant. But I learned something important 6 months ago. Sometimes the greatest sacrifice is choosing to fight instead of choosing to hide." In the front row, Marvin watched his fiancée command the room with the same grace and intelligence that had saved his life that night at La Lumiere. The scar in his leg had healed, but the memory of Diana's courage, choosing to fight Richard publicly rather than disappear into witness protection, still took his breath away. Their gamble had paid off spectacularly. Within hours of their escape from the fire escape, every major news network in the country was running the story of the billionaire CEO and the waitress who'd exposed a massive charity fraud. The evidence Marvin had provided was damning. 7 years of systematic theft from veteran support programs, falsified records, and a paper trail that led directly to Richard's personal accounts. Richard Blackwood was now serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison, his assets seized and liquidated to repay his victims. The assassination attempt had only added to his crimes, and the professional killers he'd hired had rolled over on him the moment they realized their employer could no longer protect them. "The center's trauma recovery program," Diana continued, "will serve not just our wounded warriors, but any families affected by violence or loss. Because healing isn't something we do alone. It's something we do together, with love and support and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance." After the ceremony, as guests mingled in the center's soaring atrium, Diana found Marvin standing beside the memorial wall, a stunning glass installation etched with the names of fallen service members. Darren's name wasn't there. He'd survived his injuries, though his path to recovery was ongoing. But Diana had insisted the memorial include not just those who died, but those who'd sacrificed parts of themselves for others. "How did the board meeting go this morning?" Diana asked, slipping her hand into his. "Unanimous approval. The Cortes Foundation will be funding nursing scholarships starting this fall,
full tuition, living expenses, and guaranteed positions in our veteran medical facilities upon graduation. Diana smiled, remembering her own struggles to pay for school, the nights studying by lamplight after double shifts. How many scholarships? As many as we get qualified applicants for, Marvin said simply. Money isn't the limiting factor anymore. It was true. The publicity from Richard's trial had brought unexpected opportunities. Marvin's reputation, rather than being damaged by the scandal, had been enhanced by his courage in exposing corruption and his dedication to veteran causes. Stock prices for Cortes Industries had actually risen, and new partnership offers arrived daily from companies wanting to associate with his integrity. More importantly, the foundation work had given their relationship a purpose beyond their personal love story. They'd become partners, not just in life, but in a mission that honored both Diana's sacrifice for her brother and Marvin's guilt over not stopping Richard sooner.
Diana? A voice behind them made them turn. A young woman in scrubs approached, her face bright with excitement. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to thank you. I'm Maria Santos. I just graduated from nursing school on one of your scholarships." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "Maria, it's wonderful to meet you. How was your first week on the trauma unit?" "Challenging, but amazing," Maria replied. "I keep thinking about what you said in your scholarship essay, that healing happens when people choose to fight for each other instead of just fighting for themselves. That's what I want to do with my career." After Maria left to return to her shift, Diana and Marvin walked hand in hand through the center's rehabilitation gardens. Patients in wheelchairs worked with physical therapists on the adaptive sports courts. Families gathered in the quiet meditation spaces. In the distance, they could see Darren through the window of his cognitive therapy session, working with a specialist on the speech patterns that the brain injury had stolen from him. "He's improving," Marvin observed, watching Diana's brother attempt to form words with the patient determination she'd inherited from him. "Slowly," Diana agreed, "but yes, he's getting better. Yesterday he told me he was proud of me. It took him 10 minutes to get the words out, but he said it." They sat on a bench overlooking the memory garden, where families could plant flowers in honor of their loved ones who'd served. The space was already filling with roses and lilies, sunflowers and herbs, a living testament to love that endured beyond injury and loss. "Diana," Marvin said, turning to face her fully, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." She raised an eyebrow, recognizing his serious tone. "Always? Do you ever regret it? Choosing to save me that night? Getting pulled into all of this? You could have finished nursing school quietly, lived a simple life, avoided all the media attention and investigations, and—" Diana silenced him with a kiss, soft and sure, tasting of the champagne from the dedication ceremony, and something deeper, the sweetness of a life lived with purpose and love. "Marvin Cortes," she said when they broke apart, "let me tell you what I regret. I regret that it took someone trying to poison you for us to meet. I regret that Richard stole money that could have helped veterans years ago. I regret that we can't give Darren back everything he lost in that explosion." She took his hands in hers, these hands that had learned to love without trying to possess, to support without trying to control. "But saving you, falling in love with you, building this life where we can actually make a difference?" She shook her head firmly. "I don't regret a single moment of it. You taught me that love isn't about being rescued, it's about rescuing each other every single day." As the afternoon sun painted the gardens in golden light, Diana thought about that night 6 months ago when she'd scrawled 3 desperate words on a napkin: "Don't drink anything." Those words had saved a life, but they'd done something even more important. They'd opened the door to a love that had transformed both of them. "Mrs. Diana Cortes?" A young voice interrupted their reverie. A little girl in a wheelchair,
probably 8 years old, rolled up to their bench with a social worker beside her. "Not quite yet," Diana laughed, showing her engagement ring. "We're getting married next month, but you can call me Diana." "My daddy was a soldier," the little girl said seriously. "He got hurt, and now he lives here sometimes for his therapy. Are you the lady who built this place?" "I helped," Diana replied gently, "but it was built by a lot of people who care about families like yours." "Thank you," the child said simply, then rolled away with her social worker toward the playground designed specifically for children with mobility challenges. Marvin watched the exchange with the wonder that still overtook him regularly, amazement at Diana's natural compassion, her ability to connect with anyone who needed healing. "Ready to go home?" he asked as the sun began to set behind the center's main building. "Ready," Diana replied, standing and smoothing her dress, not a server's uniform anymore, but the professional attire of someone who'd found her calling as Director of Veteran Family Services. As they walked toward the parking garage, Diana's phone buzzed with a text from the wedding planner. "Final head count needed, menu approval required, vendor confirmations due." The normal chaos of planning a celebration that would include everyone from billionaire business associates to the kitchen staff from La Lumiere who'd helped them escape that night. "Any second thoughts about the big wedding?" Marvin asked as he read over her shoulder. "Only about the size," Diana admitted. "Sometimes I think we should have eloped." "We still could," Marvin suggested with a grin. "Private jet to somewhere tropical. Just you and me and someone qualified to perform ceremonies."
Diana considered this for exactly 3 seconds before shaking her head. "No, we're having the big wedding with all our friends and family and everyone who helped us get here. Because this story isn't just about us. It's about what happens when people choose love over fear, truth over convenience, fighting together over running apart." She paused at their car, looking back at the medical center that bore her brother's name, at the lives being rebuilt inside its walls, at the future they were building together, one choice at a time. "Besides," she added, unlocking the door, "I want the whole world to see Diana Dyer marry Marvin Cortes. I want every little girl who feels invisible to know that sometimes the waitress gets the fairy tale ending." "And every billionaire learns that real wealth isn't money," Marvin replied, kissing her temple. "It's finding someone worth living for." As they drove away from the center toward the home they'd bought together, not his penthouse or her studio, but a place that belonged to both of them, Diana reached over and took his hand. The same hands that had nearly lifted poisoned wine to his lips now wore an engagement ring that matched hers, a symbol of promises made and kept. Love had triumphed, just as it always should, just as it always would for those brave enough to fight for it. What would you be willing to risk for a love that could change not just your life, but the lives of countless others? If this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible love stories. Share in the comments, what was your favorite moment between Diana and Marvin? And remember, sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the simplest act of courage.
You've come to the end of this love story, but another billionaire's secret is waiting. The next tale will be more seductive, more forbidden, and far more addictive. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Until then, guard your heart because the Powder Room Tales is only getting started.